Hello and welcome to the Ray Show podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Ray, and as always, we are coming to you from beautiful downtown Athens, Georgia, where spring is finally sprung, and it's just beautiful out today, and I hope it is in your neck of the woods, wherever you're listening from. But we got a hell of an episode for you tonight. We've got the mighty Christopher Bickel, director, on the show tonight. He's going to be talking about his new masterpiece, and I don't use that word lightly, Noster and the Mission of Light. For those of you who have seen it, you know what the fuck I'm talking about. For those who haven't, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that you're getting to watch this movie for the first time. Seriously, folks, this is one of the most fun rides I've had in I don't know how long in the cinema. And I urge you, after listening to this podcast, to run out and see Noster and the Mission of Light. Chris has other films he's going to be talking about, and is just involved in so many cool things. You know, just a delight to talk to, and we'll get to him in just a few. But I wanted to thank everyone for the amazing response to the Jane Weedland, Gwen Levy, and Candy Carpenter episode. That was one of the most fun things we've had the honor to do here on the Ray Show podcast. And I can't say enough about all three of those artists. You know, make sure you check out Gwen and Candy's stuff. They're just amazing and such a bright light in these dark times. But let's get back to the episode I got for you tonight. And you know, we've discussed the movie. If you haven't seen this movie, you know, it might be a good idea to I tried not to reveal too many spoilers, but there are some. So you might want to see the movie before you listen to the episode, or it might be a good companion piece going in. So you are your own God, so make your own decision, and I'm sure it'll be cool either way. But just what a fun ride with these characters, and just can't say enough about it. So enough of my yakking. Let's get out to the interview with Mr. Christopher Bickel. All right, everybody, welcome to the Ray Show podcast. And tonight we have got a really special episode for you. We've got filmmaker, writer, musician, all-around artistic madman Christopher Bickel on the show. How you doing, Christopher?
I'm doing good. Thank you for letting me be here. Right
on, man. Well, thanks for taking the time to do this. So the main thing, you know, I've got to brag on you here for a second, because Noster and the Mission of Light, your new film that we'll be discussing tonight, is a cult film that I put in the caliber of Ken Russell's The Devils, Repo Man. I mean, the quality of it is that strong, and it's just a delight of a movie to spend some time with. So just right off the bat, you know, how did you even think about making this film?
Okay, well, first I got to say that's very kind praise, and especially considering that those are a couple movies that I really love, and certainly had much higher budgets than we had. So first off, thank you for that. That's really too generous. But maybe to answer your question, you know, I've been making movies for a few years now. This is the third movie I've done, and I am very much an amateur at what I'm doing, and I just keep trying to like make a good one. Yeah, this one, you know, my horror is my great love, and so I'm trying to make a horror movie with not much money. We crowdfunded everything, and the whole idea was to do something that maybe Hollywood would never do.
I can see why. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you're working on this type of a DIY punk rock kind of level, you know, all you really can do is just try to make something that people aren't going to see, you know, at the multiplex at the mall.
Right, right. And it's funny you bring up punk rock because you dedicate the film to punk rock, and I think it's very fitting, because it is a very punk rock film. And let's dive into that in just a bit, but let's get a little more background on you. And just tell me, I know there's so many things in this film that just from, knowing you a little bit online that just come through, immediately, the record store, everything. Just if you would give our listeners just a little bit of background on how you got to the filmmaking portion of what you do.
Okay. So like I've started out, I came out of punk rock. I grew up as a teenager. I was really into, what I thought was the hardest stuff out there, was hair metal. So like Rat and Quiet Riot and all this stuff. And I had a cousin who gave me a mixtape that had Black Flag's My War on it. And so that's like the life-changing moment for me is when I hear that album, I'm like, this speaks to me. This is the real shit. And so that took me, like it changed my life. It took me, into finding this whole like DIY scene and starting my own band. So I'm doing bands as soon as I go into college. The first band that I did was Inhumanity. Then I was in a band called Guy in a Punchline. And so I sort of found this scene where like I could have a voice and, record our own records and put out our own records and do zines and book tours and do all this stuff, through punk rock, which was this gateway into basically being able to do anything on the cheap, because I didn't have any money when I was coming up. And but I always had wanted to make movies, and I studied film in college, but it wasn't in the cards for me. I ended up opening a record store that I ran for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years of running that store, I was like, you know what? Like, what I really want to do is I wanted to make movies. And so I closed my store down. I sold off the inventory, and I bought a bunch of gear, and I started to make my first film. And about a week into shooting my first film, all my gear got stolen, as well as all the footage I'd shot. So because everything was shot on these DV tapes back then,
right,
and that sent me kind of into like a spiral of depression for like a year, where I just like holed up in a room and like didn't do anything. And I came out of that depression, and I just got a job at a record store because that's what I knew I was good at. Records were always my like second great love aside from film. And so I went back to working in a record store, and I did that for a long time until at a certain point I realized, well, you know what? Like, I put the movie stuff on the back burner, and that's what I really wanted to do. So, another great thing happened was technology made the entryway into film very cheap. Because when I was in college, if you wanted to make a film that looked like a real movie, you would have to shoot it on actual film, on 16 millimeter film. And you'd be spending like $50,000 like just for the film,
right,
and the processing. And that's not, even going into how much you would have to pay actors and things like that.
Yeah.
So after I went back to working in a record store for maybe like a decade, I saw that there were these like DSLR cameras that could shoot on digital, but looked as good as film. Like they looked very cinematic. And I had friends in town where I live in Columbia, South Carolina, that were making feature films, and the budgets were like $10,000, but they were getting distribution worldwide. And I was like, well, this is my time now. Like, I wasted all this time working in record stores, putting off the dream. It's sort of the dream deferred thing. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and make my first film. And so I did with a film called The Theta Girl. And it was the hardest thing that I've ever done in my entire life. But, we made a movie for like, I think we spent like, I think it was like twelve or $14,000 on it. But, it's been shown all over the world, and it's gotten like good criticism and everything. And so then I was like, well, this is what I want to do. So I've never quit my day job. I still work in a record store, but like I make movies on the side now. And so then I did another movie called Bad Girls after that. And then the most recent one is Potter Noster and the Mission of Light, which is, I guess, the one we're sort of talking about today. And I think I get a little bit better each time. And I think I still haven't made like a real movie yet. I think all these movies are like punk rock demo tapes. But that's where I come from, like my movies like aren't for people that want like a polished Hollywood movie, just like the records that I was into when I was a teenager weren't, the polished, pop albums. They were like the stuff that was, recorded in a demo studio and like these like really raw, sort of rough and ready demo tapes. Like the movies that I make are like that, where there's rough edges, but you can tell that there's something that's trying to be conveyed, and there's a passion behind it, and there's something there that's not the thing that you're going to get with the Hollywood movie. Just like, when I first discovered Black Flag, like it wasn't what you were going to get with Warner Brothers, who was pushing, ZZ Top at the time.
Right.
It's like, no, like ZZ Top is cool. They're great. But like fucking SST has Black Flag, and this shit is fucking hard, and it speaks to me, and it's, it exists in this whole other sphere, and that's the sphere I'm attracted to. And so I feel like the movies that I do are that. And if I can be that for like the 14-year-old kid that was like me, so many years ago, then that's, my mission is to provide that thing.
I love everything about your mission. And, it's funny how many of us, just because of our age, I think me and you are around the same age, our late 20s. So,
Yeah.
but it's so funny how many of us, just from the time we grew up, hair metal's kind of thrown to us as this rebellious thing. And then it's like we all get 12 and 13 and we find Black Flag, and we find all these amazing things that were like an entire world that we didn't know existed. And to see that, your punk rock mission with that, this is just so badass. But let's up front talk about the music in it, and we'll get kind of in the theme. This will kind of reveal the theme a little bit. But one thing I'm so interested in is cults, and I'm as non-religious as you can get. I just love the ephemera of them, everything, and I love. You saw this probably about a decade ago. You saw a lot of these bands that were trying to mimic that style of early 70s kind of a cult rock. I don't even know what that, you can pin that down on one thing, but I'm so curious musically, what were some of your guideposts that when you started making music for this to score this amazing film?
Okay. So when I first started writing it, the way it came about was, I have some friends who, they supplied all the cars and Bad Girls, and they're just these gearheads that fix up old cars, and so they just have all these like cool, vintage automobiles, and they had contacted me and said that they had bought this bus, and that they wanted to paint it like an old hippie bus, like the Ken Kesey Further bus.
Yeah.
And they said if you ever want to use something like that in one of your movies, we have it. And I was like, well, I'm just going to write a movie around it. And so I knew that I had a bus, and I knew that I had a record store, because I knew that I could shoot in the shop where I worked. And I'd been wanting to do something that was sort of like based around record stores. So I started developing ideas around that. And I thought like, okay, so then then if you have a hippie bus, then that could be like a hippie cult, like a Manson family type thing. And so then I started thinking about like, well, what are hippie cults that put out records? So that I could bring the record store element in. And I started thinking about the Source family, which was a kind of a famous cult in the early 70s in California. And I had one of their records that I bought at a thrift store. Like this, so there was this cult called the Source family, and they had a band called Yehovah 13, and they put out several records that are like crazy good psychedelic records. And I found one for $1 at a thrift store at one point, and this record's worth probably like $600 or $700. And so I started thinking like, okay, so I can base something kind of around a cult that has a band that puts out records, and somebody works in a record store and the record's worth a bunch of money, and that sort of leads them down the path. And then we could kind of go into more of like a Manson family type thing with it. And so all these ideas just kept sort of bouncing off of each other. And that's kind of where I came to where I was with the movie. And so I had written the basic idea of the script out, and I knew that I needed to have a band, that I wanted to record an entire album of music that was the music of the band, that was sort of a Source family Yehovah 13 type band. So I just contacted every local musician that I knew that I thought was cool, and I sent them an email and I said, I want to do this thing, and it's supposed to be a band from like say 1972 that are maybe a little bit ahead of their time in 1972, and they're a cult, and it's a bunch of people from disparate musical backgrounds that are all coming together to put their different styles together. So I want it to be a little bit of Black Sabbath and a little bit of the Stooges, but a little bit of krautrock like Can and stuff like that, Velvet Underground, like anything that would have been cool in the early 70s, because my idea was for the cult was that they were like a super intelligent cult. They were like the Manson family, but also members of Mensa, just like a super smart, kind of witchy cult. And so they would have been into the coolest music of the time. And so I got all these people together and I said, we have these 2 studio dates booked. Just come up with some song ideas and we'll go in and record. And I had like 15 musicians come in, and over 2 days we just like showed each other our ideas, and everybody played on each other's stuff, and then we just recorded a whole album of just this crazy, like kind of psychedelic, folky, weird music.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So then I wrote the rest of the movie around that.
I mean, you've got the bus, the Merry Pranksters kind of, thing, and now you have this. I mean, that seems such a fertile ground to write a movie after that. So it kind of wrote itself once I had the pieces in place. When you are kind of like how I am, if you are a filmmaker that has a very, very low budget. So our budget on this movie, we crowdfunded it, ended up being around $20,000. And so there's not much there, because most of that money is going to go to buy food for the actors and pay them like a very, small stipend for their daily rate. And so, there's not a lot of money there. You basically are just like, what can we do to maximize this? And so you have to write around things you have access to. Right.
So that's why it's like, oh, I've got a bus and I've got a record store, and I can put together like some hippies, and a lot of the people that I worked with in this movie are people that I worked with in my previous films. So I kind of wrote a lot of it around them too, because I knew that they like working with me. So I knew that they would want to be in the next movie, and so I was able to kind of write to them.
Right. That's fantastic, and to get what you got on such a small budget is just beyond comprehensible to me. Tell us about this cast a little bit. I mean, the cast really makes this come alive, and it just really moves. just from beginning to end. So tell me a little bit about this cast.
Yeah, I mean, everybody did a great job. So, like the main villain, Potter Noster, is a guy, Mike Amison, who's an older actor that I've worked with in all my movies, and he will be in probably every movie that I ever do. So I knew that I was going to write it around him. And then there were three actresses that were in my previous film, Bad Girls, and I knew I wanted to work with all three of them again. So I wrote characters for them, and I ended up casting an actress for the lead, and we were just like a couple weeks away from shooting, and she had to drop out at like the 12th hour, an issue with her family. And so I kind of found the lead actress who played Max at the very last minute, and I didn't think that she was exactly what I was looking for, but I was kind of in a tight spot of like, oh, I've got to get somebody in here. And I knew that because I worked with her on a short film that I did, and I knew that she had a really good attitude, and I knew that she showed up on time. But it turned out that she was actually perfect for the role, like in ways that I didn't really see beforehand. And so I can't even imagine anybody else like being the main character, Max. And the guy that played Jason, the heavy metal drummer guy, he was a guy that just sort of saw a casting call that I did, and he wrote in and he sent me his reel, and his reel was so good that I was like, I think you're way too good for this movie. and I actually kind of tried to dissuade him from it. I was like, oh, you've got the part. Like, if you want to do it, but you're really too good for it. But he's like, no, I want to do it. He was really hungry to do stuff because typically what he does is he's in a bunch of big budget Hollywood movies, but he's not actually in them. He's the guy where, like, if they're lighting the scene, they're like, we need Leonardo DiCaprio's double to stand here while we light it. And then he's the guy that stands there while they light the scene.
That sounds like a fantastic job, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And then when they get the lighting right, then he goes away, and then they bring in the real actor. So for him, it was like, oh no, I get to be a real actor, and I get to be a lead role in this thing. And so he stepped up, and he was so fucking great. Like, I mean, everybody did such a good job. And, like, my role is I'm basically, like, I can't afford to pay crew. So I'm directing and shooting and lighting and doing all these things. So it's kind of hard to direct actors when you're also trying to keep them in frame and in focus. So if you cast it right and you get good people, then they take a lot of that load off of you, where you're not having to like direct so hard, because, I mean, my dream would be, I'm not a megalomaniac. Like, I don't enjoy doing like every role. Like, my dream would be to have enough money where I could pay someone else to shoot it and I could just direct. And I think my direction would be a lot better if that's all I was doing. But that's not where I was on this.
Right.
So thankfully I had some like really talented people that could sort of direct themselves a lot of the time, while I was just trying to like make sure everybody was in focus.
Right. And it just sounds like juggling like that. Just, oh my God, that's just a nightmare waiting to happen some days.
It is. I mean, it's terrible. Like I don't recommend it. Like if you can have the money to pay someone else to shoot it, and pay someone else to edit, and pay someone else to do the sound, like, do it, do that. But I'm not at that point yet. So I wear a lot of hats on these things.
Well, I think you'll be there in no time, my friend. And, I really just believe in that. I mean, how can you not love a movie that has a Gizm reference in it?
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. So I knew when I was writing it that I needed to like hit a niche, uh, because if I really like got nerdy about it and really hit a niche, then it would find its audience, and that audience would love it because it spoke to them. So, I'm putting in like references to Gizm and references to the Manson album on ESP and things like that, where it's like people who know and they're like, oh man, like I get all this stuff, and the people that don't know are like, oh, like I don't get like all this dialogue, but it's not for them. It's not for them at all. Like it's for a very specific group of people, basically, are people who worked in record stores or have been record collectors and just like extreme nerds about music and like get like references to like weird obscure shit. Like that's who it's for.
Yeah, and it never takes away. Like my mind jumps to the Minor Threat recreation shot coming off the porch. You know, that's just a beautiful shot, even if people don't know. Hey, we're referencing Minor Threat here. One of their records.
Yeah, and you're probably one of like 20 people that got that. Most people like didn't get that at all, but I'm like, there's gonna be like, I might find 100 people that are gonna get what that shot is, and they're gonna like, holy shit, like that's the fucking Minor Threat Salad Days cover. That's fucking cool. So that's who that's for. And my hope is that when those people see it, they're gonna tell their friends and be like, oh yeah, like this has all these like cool references, like things that I get, like you're gonna love it. And so I can't afford to pay publicists. I can't afford advertising. So, but if I can really appeal to like a very select cult audience, they're going to tell their friends about it.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's just so much packed into this in just every frame of it, and this is an intense movie. There's an intensity to it that people that like these films like me love. But there's such humor in this movie too. I go to the driver's dialogue. If everything was blue, there would be no color at all, least of all blue. Both times I've seen it, I've laughed out loud and had to pause it just to get my shit back together for a minute. And there's so much of that in this, despite
you might
the
be the only
intensity.
person. I mean to interrupt you, but you might be the only person that appreciated that line because because I've sat through this movie with several audiences and like nobody reacts to that. I'm like, oh, that's like the best line.
Oh.
and you so far are the only person that's ever pointed that out.
Well, I appreciate that.
So
I take
thank
that
you.
as a badge of honor. But when you got into the writing of this, how versed were you in, for instance, the movie starts with this very Crowley-esque figure in the desert. And how did you deep into some of those things like rituals and magic and all that stuff when you were researching this?
Well, I didn't really research it that much because it's just all stuff that I've been interested in my entire life. So, I mean, there was definitely like a point in my life where I really got into the occult and I really got into Crowley and stuff like that. And so I just read everything that I could read on that stuff. And then, it kind of got put aside, and then I got interested in other things. And so this movie has a lot of stuff that were just interests of mine that I knew that if I just put all these interests into the movie, there'd be other people out there that would have the same interests that would be like, oh yeah, like I get that. Like that's, I've read the same thing and I've seen that before.
Right.
So that was the idea. I didn't really do any research for this. It was just stuff that I thought was cool, and I just wanted to put all the stuff that I thought was cool into a movie.
Right on, man. I mean, that just sounds perfect to me, and it is something that it just seems like the knowledge just made you write an original version of all that stuff to have contained in the film. But too quick, you've been so kind to talk to us tonight. We'll get to the appearance we got coming up here in Athens here in just a minute. But let me say, Christopher, I've been on drugs several times. Thankfully, voluntarily, of my own volition. And I must say, it's very difficult to portray a psychedelic vibe like that accurately in a film. And dare I say, you nailed it in this Kenneth Anger kind of just crazy madness. So, how did you get some of those effects that you were using, like the glowing and the things like that? It just really seems like you nailed that part of it.
Yeah, so this is the third movie I've done, and every movie has had like a drug element, and I've been chasing this dragon of trying to recreate in film what a hallucinogenic experience is actually like. And I don't know if I've gotten there yet, but I think I've gotten closer to it with this one. And I'm going to keep chasing that, like with whatever I do next. But yeah, like that experience is so profound, uh, and I've always been interested in movies that tried to show that experience, and like none of them have ever nailed it. But like, maybe have you ever seen Enter the Void? The
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Gaspar Noé movie. Maybe that's one of the closest ones I've seen to getting there. And so I'm always interested in movies that can try to like approximate that, and that's a thing that I've wanted to do. So yeah, so in this movie, they drug the victims, and obviously the drugs that they're using are hallucinogenic, and so I wanted to try to like make those scenes as hallucinogenic as possible. And a lot of it it's really simple stuff. Like it's just like lighting stuff and flashing images and sound design stuff. And a lot of it is just kind of like trying to disorient the audience. So the main scenes that are kind of like the crazy like torture and murder scenes all have an element of trying to disorient the audience.
Right.
And so I think some of the scenes are more effective than others, but there's a few of them that I think like really kind of get, especially if you're in a real, not watching it on a laptop, but if you're in a real theater where it's a dark room and all of the light is coming just from the projection and it's flashing at a certain rate, and then the sounds are coming from the full 5.1 surround mix, where they're coming like from in front of you and behind you, and like and going back and forth from position to position. I think it can disorient the audience in a way that actually is pretty effective. But you got to actually see it in a theater,
Right,
to,
right.
to get that.
Well, I think you succeeded in that so well. And it's one of those things. It's like drinking's hard to portray. Somebody being drunk. I can only think of maybe Donald Pleasance and Wake and Fright that really like shows the madness of some of those 3:30 drinking sessions that thankfully are well over in my life. But but yeah, getting back to one thing, there's so many neat little I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a line in the movie called "fuck you," where a character goes "fuck your entire generation." And when you go back and you look at the whole film, it's such a beautiful, really just kind of hammers that point home, in a lot of ways, and really, and I think just the great, like, poking the bear kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that every generation is going to hate the generation before it, and there's things about the hippie generation that I love and I'm obsessed with. Like I'm obsessed with Abby Hoffman and the Yippie movement.
Me
and
too,
all these
yeah.
all these like really kind of extremist like the Symbionese Liberation Army and things like that those things are really appealing to me. But then you kind of, in hindsight, you look at that generation, like a guy like Jerry Rubin, who wrote this amazing book called Do It, that was like a blueprint for revolution, and then like 10 years later he's a yuppie. and you see how this entire generation like had these plans for a revolution, and then they all just sold out and were co-opted and became part of the system. And then, the punks, the generation that I'm from, like I see like all these, kids that I knew when I was in high school and college that were like these extremists, and they're all fucking, Republicans now. And it's just like every generation sells out. And so there's always a new generation coming up that's going to be like, fuck you. Like,
Right.
fuck all of y'all. And so that's where that comes from, and it's not saying that, I mean, every generation is fucked up, because basically one of the characters in the movie, I think, sums it, because it's the character Deja Vu, and she says, people in general are assholes. And like, that's the gist of the whole movie.
It really is. Oh my God.
Like everybody's an asshole. Like, if you're not one now, you're probably gonna be one. You just give it like 10 years and you're probably gonna be an asshole too. Like I'm like, if 18-year-old me could meet me now, like he would probably think I'm an asshole.
Right.
So that's kind of what that's all about. But also I felt like that was just kind of I felt like for the climax of the movie, I needed a good line,
right.
Just a good, like, I think about like all those like Arnold Schwarzenegger movies from the 80s where like, he just had a good line.
Oh yeah.
He's like, you remember when I said I was going to kill you last? I lied.
Right.
And he kills the guy. Like, so to me, that was his, in this movie, that character, his line was his main, like, fuck you to everybody line was, fuck your entire generation, just as he like stabs the guy in the balls.
Well, and I was talking to a guy last night about this. There's a reason those Schwarzenegger movies work. There's a reason like Commando's so watchable, and it's his great vibe and everything, and great lines like that.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite movies of all time. A movie that I've watched probably 20 times, and I love it every single time.
Every time. I don't know what it is. I've been watching it the majority of my life.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I want to go back to one thing. It's amazing that I've sailed past my 50s now, and I'm thankful not to have become a Republican or any of this other shit. So I am equally as mad as the younger generation are at some of our cohorts.
Me too. And it's weird, like, because in some ways I feel like I've gotten like more like left, as I've gotten older, because I see like all the shit that's going on. It's like we have a historical record. We know how this goes. Like, this is Nazi Germany all over again.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing it play out. And it's like, and like all these people that's like, well, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time and I'd kill Hitler. It's like, well, he's here right now.
Yeah, maybe just try being a decent human being and fighting to keep our democracy right fucking now,
Yeah.
But with, I think, you wear your heart on your sleeve with your art in the best way. And that's a testament to what you're doing, my friend. And
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And it's scary, dark times now, so we've got to be bright lights out there, man, and trying to lead things to a better place, especially with the fucked up vibe right now. But
well, yeah, like when I shot this movie, it was only like a year or so ago, and if I'd known how shitty things were going to get, like I probably would have like gone in way harder on the subtext of it.
Right.
Like I would have been like way more heavy-handed with it, because it's just like, holy shit, like things are so bad right now.
Right.
Like I had no idea it was going to get this bad so quickly.
But art and movies like this are a place where the artistic, where the people that the seekers can go and congregate And
Right.
that brings up that you're coming here to Athens to do a screening, and you've done other screenings, and I'm sure there'll be other screenings. How do you enjoy doing those and sitting with an audience like that?
Oh, it's great because I can see where things work and they don't work, and I can see where people laugh, and usually, what I've experienced so far is people laugh in the right places and they gasp in the right places. So the screenings have been really good for me. Not too embarrassing. So I mean, that's what you want is you just
Right.
don't want to be embarrassed by what you've made. Uh, and so far it's been pretty good where so if I attend a screening, which I'm going to attend the screening in Athens, I always do a Q&A, and the Q&As have just all been really great. Like, people have really thoughtful questions. I mean, some of the questions are more philosophical and metaphysical, and then some of the questions are just like, well, how did you do that special effect? And I like talking about both things, so because the special effects are fun. I like explaining like how we did stuff very cheaply that looks,
Amazing. It looks
yeah. I
amazing.
mean, if nothing else, like some of the special effects are over the top, and I like to have some over the top stuff so that people can talk about it afterwards. And so yeah, like so far it's been really great.
Well, yeah, man, it's gonna be a fun night. We got Big Trouble also playing afterwards. They're a great band here from Athens, Georgia. Check them out. But
Yeah, and I love doing stuff like this where it's not just a movie, but it's bringing in like local like music and stuff like that. Like, I mean, like we talked about at the top of the thing. I come out of punk rock, so it's like if we can keep this punk rock, that's where my heart is. So it's super cool that not only is it a movie, but we get to have like a musical element as well.
hell yeah. Well, you've been so kind to give us your time tonight, Christopher. What's next for you? What are you working on right now?
I have a bunch of ideas. It's another horror movie. I'm just trying to like coalesce them and get them into a spot where I feel like I can write it down and make it, an 80 to 90 minute script. Because right now it's like, well, this would be like a fucking 5 hour movie. So I can have that. I like things that are lean. I like short movies. So I'm
Me
trying to
too.
kind of, yeah, I'm trying to get the ideas to where I know I can sit down and write it all out, and it's gonna like just come out in one piece.
Well, if you need a stoner hesher or a sadistic cult member, you have my number now. So,
All
and
right.
I work cheap. So,
All right. Well, hey, that's my price.
right on, right on. Well, Christopher, thank you so much. What's the best place for our listeners to get in touch with you, and more and about your other films, your whole catalog?
Okay, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Blue Sky. So if you just search Christopher Bickel, you can find me in any of those places. The website for the movie is www.potternoster.com, and that will take you to a place where you can buy the movie. You can either buy the streaming or the Blu-ray, which I recommend because the Blu-ray is a double disc that has like a ton of like cool extra shit on it. Um,
Oh wow,
and
that's awesome. That sounds like
yeah,
a treat, man.
yeah. So the Blu-ray. So we wrote all of this music for the movie that's not actually in the movie, but I shot music videos for all of it.
Oh my
So
God.
that's yeah, that's on the Blu-ray, the second disc, and there's also like a making up documentary, and there's like bloopers, which are really good.
I love a
Like,
blooper reel. Who
yeah,
doesn't love a blooper reel?
yeah,
Come on.
they're really funny, and so there's all this like just a ton of extra shit. So like if anybody still does physical media, I recommend the Blu-ray because it's maxed out. It's worth the money, and just in general, like as a filmmaker, I can say that physical media is so fucking important, and I know for musicians as well. Like a musician that can sell a CD is worth so much more than
Yes, sir.
than
Yes,
a fucking
sir.
1,000 people streaming it. Like, so for filmmakers, I'm just gonna toss this in here. As a filmmaker, if someone watches my movie on Amazon, uh, just as like an Amazon Prime thing, um, it's like a 3 cents goes to the filmmaker
Disgraceful.
per
Disgraceful.
view. So in order to make any, there's like no way to make your money back. But even to make anything, like you have to have like millions of views. But if I can sell a Blu-ray of my movie, uh, after the unit cost is made back, like I'm still gonna make like $10 off of that Blu-ray. So
It
you
seems
know,
like the only decision to me out there, everybody. And,
yeah.
somebody
So
that,
if you want to support filmmakers or if you want to support musicians, just buy their shit. Like buy a record or buy a CD or buy a Blu-ray, because it's actually going to go to support them. And it's not like, if you're a musician, you're on Spotify and you're making like a third of a cent every time somebody listens to your shit, like it's nothing.
nothing.
So just like fucking buy their 7-inch, buy their record. Uh, physical media like is so important, and I hate that we've gotten so far away from it.
I do too, and as somebody that grew up with it, me and you, it's so much cooler, and you've got the liner notes. You can really make an afternoon out of it. You can look at, I'm just all about the physical media. I've never really left hard, but I do see it coming back, and for all the reasons you just said, my friend.
And you get to keep it forever. Like there, if you're on Amazon and you have a Kindle and you've bought these books, you think you've bought them, but then Amazon might decide like, no, you don't have that anymore, and then like it's gone.
Right.
And but if you have a physical book, like it's on your shelf forever, and you can pick it up anytime and you can go back to it. And it's the same with a record. It's the same with a DVD or a Blu-ray. Just having access to that thing whenever you want to see it, and not at the whim of some, mega corporation that doesn't give a fuck about anybody except their own profits, just deciding like, oh no, we're not carrying that anymore.
Right, and most of the movies, even I've seen some of the ones they rent on there, are just these horrible DVD transfers that are not worth your money, in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. And it's with the way things come in and out of print now, and just the way the litigious nature of the world now. It's best to have that copy that you can listen to any fucking time,
Absolutely.
But well, Chris, you've been so Christopher, you've been so kind to us tonight, and just want to thank you so much for coming on the Ratio Podcast.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
I want to thank Mr. Christopher Bickel for taking the time to answer our silly questions here on the Ratio Podcast. Make sure you support him in every way you can. Hopefully we're going to have some of the cast on soon, so make sure to see the film. And it's just, I'm evangelical about this. You need to watch this movie. If you have any interest in genre film or underground film, this one's for you. So support Christopher and everything he's doing, and you'll be better for it, as we all are. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Ratio Podcast. We have got some amazing guests coming up this season all year long, coming right at you. I know that sounds silly, but it's just a really exciting time here, and I'm so excited to bring some of these amazing guests and their stories to you all. And I want to just welcome all our new listeners. It's such a delight to have you, and we appreciate all your support from the bottom of our hearts. Make sure to follow us on the socials, and stay switched on, and we will talk to you soon.